the mail-order bride everyone rejected. Until a cowboy whispered, "Will you try with me?" The mail-order bride everyone rejected. Until a cowboy whispered, "Will you try with me?" The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and Claire Morgan stumbled out onto the dusty street of Copper Ridge, her worn dress clinging to her thin frame. 3 men stood waiting at the general store, arms crossed, faces hard as the desert rocks surrounding the town. She recognized them from the letters, the photographs they'd sent. Her hands trembled as she clutched her single carpet bag. The first man, a banker named Harold, took one look at her scarred left cheek and turned away without a word. The scar ran from her temple to her jawline, a reminder of the fire that had taken her family 2 years ago. She'd written about it in her letters, but seeing it was different.
Always different.
The second man, a cattle rancher called Vincent, stepped closer. His eyes traveled over her gaunt figure, her calloused hands, the way her hair had thinned from months of poor nutrition back east. He shook his head slowly. "I need a wife who can handle ranch work, not someone who looks half dead already." He walked away, spurs jingling. The third man didn't even approach. He simply mounted his horse and rode off, dust trailing behind him. Claire stood alone in the street as the stagecoach driver tossed down her bag and drove away. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. She had 17 cents in her pocket, no return ticket, and nowhere to go. The other townspeople had stopped to watch the spectacle, whispering behind their hands. Shame burned hotter than the sun on her skin. She picked up her bag and started walking, though she had no destination in mind. Her legs felt weak, her vision blurred with unshed tears. She wouldn't cry in front of these people. She'd promised herself that much. "Miss, wait." The voice was quiet, almost hesitant. She turned to see a man leading a paint horse toward her. He was tall, wearing dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen better days. His face was weathered, young but worn, with kind eyes that didn't look away from her scar. "My name's Ben Carter. I work a small spread about 5 miles out." He cleared his throat, seeming nervous. "I heard about the mail-order situation. Wasn't part of it myself, didn't have the money to advertise properly." Claire waited, expecting another rejection, another reason why she wasn't good enough. Ben looked at his boots, then back at her face, meeting her eyes directly. "I know this isn't how things are supposed to go, and I know you don't know me from Adam, but I've got a cabin, some land, and it gets mighty lonely out there. Will you try with me?" The question hung in the air between them. Claire studied his face, searching for cruelty or pity, but found neither. Just honest hope and something that looked like understanding. "I can't pay you much," he continued quickly. "The ranch is struggling. I can't promise comfort or easy days. But I can promise respect, and I'll never turn you away because of what's on the outside." He gestured toward her face gently. "That scar tells me you're a survivor. That's worth more than gold out here." Claire felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been frozen since the fire. "You don't know anything about me. Then tell me on the ride home," Ben said simply. "If you decide it's not right, I'll bring you back tomorrow. No hard feelings, and I'll pay for a room at the boarding house tonight either way." She looked back at the town, at the people still watching, waiting for her humiliation to be complete. Then she looked at Ben Carter, at his outstretched hand and his honest face. "All right," she whispered. "I'll try." Ben's smile was small but genuine. He helped her onto his horse, careful not to touch her more than necessary, then swung up behind her. As they rode out of Copper Ridge, Claire didn't look back. Whatever lay ahead couldn't be worse than what she'd left behind, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt something other than despair. She felt possibility. The ride to Ben's ranch took them through rolling hills painted gold by the late afternoon sun. Claire sat stiffly in front of him, hyper-aware of his presence but grateful he didn't try to fill the silence with empty chatter. The paint horse moved steadily beneath them, and the wind carried the scent of sage and dry grass. After about a mile, Ben finally spoke. "The cabin isn't much. Built it myself 3 years ago when I bought the land. Got about 200 acres, 30 head of cattle, some chickens. Lost my partner last winter to pneumonia. He was my older brother, Jack. We were supposed to build this place together." Claire heard the grief in his voice. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Ben shifted slightly. "That's when things got hard. Can't run a ranch alone. Not properly. Tried hiring help, but nobody wants to work for the wages I can afford. Been thinking about selling, but this land, it's all I got left of 'em." She understood loss. "The fire that gave me this," she touched her scarred cheek. "It took my parents and my younger sister. I was 17. Woke up in a hospital with nothing. No family, no home, no money. How'd you survive? Worked in a factory for a year, then a boarding house. The woman who ran it, Mrs. Patterson, she showed me the advertisements for mail-order brides. Said it might be my only chance at a real life. Claire's voice hardened. She was probably right. Nobody back east wanted to court a scarred girl with no dowry. Their loss, Ben said quietly. The simple statement, offered without flourish or pity, made Claire's throat tighten. They rode in silence for another stretch until buildings appeared on the horizon. The cabin was small but sturdy, built from rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. A barn stood nearby, its red paint fading but structure sound. Chickens scratched in the yard, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. Ben helped her down, then led the horse to the barn. Claire stood in the yard, taking in her potential new home. It was isolated, rough, nothing like she'd imagined. But it was honest, and after the day she'd had, honesty felt like a luxury. When Ben returned, he seemed nervous again. I should show you inside. Like I said, it's not fancy. The cabin's interior was sparse but clean. One large room served as kitchen and living area, with a fireplace on one wall. A door led to what she assumed was a bedroom. Simple furniture, handmade, everything practical. No decoration except a faded photograph on the mantel showing two young men, one of them clearly Ben, both smiling. "That's Jack and me," Ben said, following her gaze. "Taken the day we bought this land." Claire set down her carpet bag. "Where would I sleep? Bedroom's yours. I'll take the loft above." He pointed to a ladder leading up. "Won't bother you none." She turned to face him fully. "You're offering marriage to a complete stranger, giving me your bedroom, and expecting nothing in return. Why?" Ben removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Because I remember what it's like to be desperate. When Jack died, I thought about giving up every single day. If he hadn't made me promise to keep going, I probably would have." He met her eyes. "I saw you standing in that street today, and I saw that same look. Like you were deciding whether to keep fighting. Figured maybe we could help each other keep going." Claire studied him carefully. He was younger than she'd first thought, probably only 25 or 26. Hard work had aged him, but there was still something boyish in his features when he smiled. More importantly, there was sincerity. She'd learned to recognize liars during her time in the city, and Ben Carter wasn't one. "What would you expect from a wife?" she asked directly. Ben looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. "Help with the ranch work if you're able. Cooking, mending, normal household things. Eventually, if things worked out between us, maybe companionship. But I'm not expecting, I wouldn't force." He trailed off, color rising in his cheeks. "I appreciate your honesty." Claire walked to the window, looking out at the vast open space. "I can cook, though I'm not great at it. I can mend clothes, clean, tend chickens. I've never worked cattle, but I can learn. I'm stronger than I look. I believe you." She turned back to him. "I have conditions. Name them. First, if I stay, we marry properly. I won't live in sin, even out here. Second, I want time before we're truly husband and wife in all ways. I need to trust you first." Agreed. "Third, if either of us decides this isn't working within the first 3 months, we can annul it. No questions, no anger." Ben nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Though I've got one condition of my own." Claire tensed. "What?" "You give it an honest try. Don't give up at the first hardship. Ranch life is difficult, especially for someone not used to it. There'll be days you hate it, hate me, hate everything about this place. But if you're going to stay, I need to know you'll see it through the bad times, not just run when things get tough." It was Claire's turn to nod. "I can agree to that. I'm tougher than those men in town thought." "I know you are." Ben extended his hand. "So we got a deal?" Claire shook his hand firmly. His palm was calloused, his grip careful. "We have a deal. Reverend comes through once a month. He'll be back next week. That work for you?" "Yes." Ben smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Well then, Mrs. Carter-to-be, how about I show you around the place properly, and then we figure out dinner?" For the first time since the fire, Claire felt something like hope stirring in her chest. This wasn't the life she'd planned, wasn't the fairy tale the other girls at the boarding house had whispered about, but it was real, and it was hers if she wanted it. She thought about those men in Copperidge, about their quick judgments and cold rejections, and realized Ben Carter had given her something none of them had. A choice. "Lead the way," she said. As they stepped back outside into the golden evening light, Claire allowed herself to imagine a future here. It wouldn't be easy. She knew that already. But maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Claire woke before dawn each morning to the sound of Ben moving around downstairs, preparing for the day's work. He was unfailingly polite, always knocking before entering any room she occupied, keeping conversation practical and brief. She appreciated his respect even as the formality felt strange. The ranch work was harder than anything she'd experienced in the city. Her hands, already calloused from factory work, blistered from new tasks. Feeding chickens seemed simple until one ornery rooster attacked her, leaving a nasty scratch on her arm. Learning to milk the cow, a patient creature Ben called Daisy, resulted in more milk on Claire than in the bucket for the first 3 days, but she persisted. Every morning she forced herself out of bed despite screaming muscles. Every task Ben showed her, she practiced until she could do it competently. She wouldn't be the weak, useless woman those men in town had assumed her to be. Ben worked from dawn until well past dusk, mending fences, tending cattle, fixing equipment that constantly broke down. He came in exhausted each night, eating whatever Claire had managed to cook without much comment. She knew her meals were mediocre at best, disastrous at worst, but he never complained. On the 4th evening after a particularly grueling day of failed bread and burnt stew, Claire found Ben in the barn fixing a broken saddle. She'd been avoiding him out of embarrassment, but it was time to face facts. "I'm a terrible cook," she said without preamble. Ben looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "You're learning." The bread was hard as a rock. "The stew was inedible. You've been eating jerky and canned beans because I've ruined everything else." He set down his tools. Jack couldn't cook either when we started. "Took him 6 months to make decent biscuits. You've been here 4 days. Still." Claire crossed her arms, defensive despite his kindness. "You're working yourself half to death, and I can't even provide a proper meal." Ben stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "You fed the chickens without being asked this morning? You figured out how to milk Daisy properly? You mended 3 of my shirts last night, and I noticed you patched the hole in the roof of the chicken coop." He stepped closer. "You're pulling your weight, Claire. Nobody expects perfection." She wanted to argue, but found herself blinking back unexpected tears instead. The exhaustion, the fear of failing, the constant anxiety about whether she'd made the right choice, it all threatened to overwhelm her. "Hey." Ben's voice softened. "What's really wrong? I keep thinking about those men in town, about how they looked at me like I was worthless. What if they were right? What if I can't do this?" Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Come with me. Want to show you something." He led her out of the barn toward the eastern pasture. The sun was setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They walked for about 10 minutes until they reached a small fenced area on a hill. Inside were 2 simple wooden crosses. "My parents," Ben explained. "They homesteaded this land 40 years ago. Ma died when I was 12, Pa 3 years later. They worked themselves to the bone trying to make this place profitable." He touched one of the crosses gently. "Pa told me something before he died. He said the land doesn't care about your plans or your dreams. It only cares about whether you show up every day and do the work." Claire stood beside him, listening. Those men in town, they were looking for something perfect, something easy. But nothing out here is easy or perfect. What matters is whether you're willing to keep trying when things get hard. Ben turned to face her. "You've been here less than a week, and you haven't quit. You've gotten knocked down, literally, by that rooster, and you got back up. That tells me everything I need to know. But what if I'm not strong enough? You survived a fire that killed your family. You survived alone in a city with nothing. You stood in that street and faced rejection from 3 men in front of the whole town, and you still had the courage to take a chance on a stranger." Ben's voice was firm. "Claire, you're plenty strong enough." Something in his words cracked the dam she'd been building around her emotions. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them. Ben didn't move to comfort her, didn't try to touch her, just stood nearby, a steady presence, while she cried. When she finally stopped, wiping her face with her sleeve, she felt lighter somehow. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the scar, not the failed bride, just me." Ben smiled. "That works both ways. You haven't once treated me like a charity case or a desperate man who couldn't find a wife the normal way. You treat me like a person." They walked back to the cabin in comfortable silence. That night, Claire made a simple meal of fried eggs and potatoes, and it was the first thing she'd cooked that actually tasted good. Ben praised it genuinely, and she felt a small swell of pride. The next morning, Reverend Peters arrived unexpectedly, 2 days earlier than scheduled. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a horse that looked as old as he was. "Ben Carter," he called out as Ben emerged from the barn. "Heard in town you might be needing my services." Ben glanced at Claire, who'd come out of the cabin at the sound of voices. She nodded slightly. They'd barely known each other a week, but something felt right about moving forward. "Yes, sir," Ben said. "If you have time, we'd like to get married." The ceremony was brief, conducted in the cabin's main room, with no witnesses except the Reverend's ancient horse visible through the window. Claire wore the same worn dress she'd arrived in, wishing briefly for something prettier, something that made her feel less like a girl playing dress-up in adult decisions. But when Ben took her hand and spoke his vows, his voice steady and sure, she felt the weight of the commitment. This was real. She was binding her life to this man's, this land's, this uncertain futures. "I, Ben Carter, take you, Claire Morgan, to be my lawful wedded wife. I promise to provide for you, protect you, and respect you all my days." When it was her turn, Claire's voice trembled slightly. "I, Claire Morgan, take you, Ben Carter, to be my lawful wedded husband. I promise to stand by you, work beside you, and honor you all my days." The Reverend pronounced them married, and Ben leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. His kiss was brief and chaste, barely a brush of lips, but it sealed something between them. After the Reverend left, declining their offer of a meal, Claire and Ben stood in the cabin, feeling suddenly awkward as husband and wife. "Nothing has to change," Ben said quickly. "I'll still sleep in the loft. We'll still take things slow." Claire appreciated his consideration, but she also felt a strange new connection to this man who was now her husband. "Ben, we're married now. Maybe we could eat dinner together properly tonight instead of you wolfing it down and running back outside." He looked surprised, then pleased. "I'd like that." That evening, they sat across from each other at the small table, and for the first time they talked about more than just ranch work. Ben told her about growing up on this land, about his dreams of expanding the herd, about Jack's wild plans for building an empire out of dirt and cattle. Claire shared memories of her life before the fire, the good parts she rarely let herself remember. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was partnership, and that felt like a good beginning. As the night deepened and the oil lamp flickered between them, Claire realized that somewhere between the rejection and Copper Ridge and this quiet moment, she'd stopped running from her past and started building toward a future. When Ben finally stood to head up to the loft, he paused. "Good night, wife." Claire smiled. "Good night, husband." She lay awake for a long time that night, listening to him move around above her, thinking about the strange turn her life had taken. She was married to a man she barely knew, living on an isolated ranch, facing work that pushed her body to its limits. By all accounts, she should be terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt since before the fire. She felt like she belonged somewhere. The cattle started dying 3 weeks after the wedding. Ben found the first one on a Monday morning, a young heifer lying stiff in the north pasture. By Wednesday, 3 more were dead, and panic had set in. "It's got to be disease," Ben said, pacing the cabin floor while Claire cleaned up from breakfast. "Maybe something they ate, or water contamination. I need to check every water source on the property." "I'll help," Claire offered immediately. "It's a full day's ride to cover everything. You've never ridden that long." "Then I'll learn today." She met his eyes firmly. "We're partners, Ben." "You said so yourself." They spent 12 hours in the saddle, checking every creek, every watering hole, every place the cattle might drink. Claire's legs screamed in protest. Her back ached, but she didn't complain. She watched Ben work, saw the fear in his eyes when they found another dead calf, and understood that this ranch was his entire life. "Here," Ben said suddenly, dismounting near a small pond. He knelt at the water's edge, then cursed viciously. "Someone's dumped something in the water. Look at the discoloration." Claire climbed down stiffly and joined him. The water had an odd sheen on its surface, and dead fish floated near the shore. "Who would do this? Only one person I can think of." Ben's jaw clenched. "Vernon Hayes owns the property to the east. He's been trying to buy me out for 2 years. Made an offer right after Jack died. Got angry when I refused. He'd kill your cattle just to force you to sell. It's happened before, to other small ranchers. Hayes has been buying up land all over the county, building his empire. He doesn't like anyone saying no to him." Claire felt anger rise in her chest, hot and fierce. "What can we do?" Ben stood slowly. Move the herd to the south pasture, away from this water source. Hope we caught it in time. And then I ride to Vernon's place and have a conversation. I'm coming with you. Claire, no. Vernon Hayes is dangerous. He's got men who work for him. Rough types. Which is exactly why you shouldn't go alone. She grabbed his arm. I'm your wife, Ben. I'm not letting you ride into danger by yourself. They argued for 10 minutes, but Claire refused to budge. Finally, Ben relented, though his expression remained troubled. They spent the rest of the day moving the cattle, exhausting work that left them both filthy and worn out. The next morning, they rode toward the Hayes Ranch. It was an impressive spread, probably 10 times the size of Ben's property, with a massive house visible from the road. Several ranch hands watched them approach, their expressions unwelcoming. Vernon Hayes himself emerged from the barn as they dismounted. He was a large man in his 50s, well-dressed despite the rural setting, with cold blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Ben Carter, Vernon said, his voice carrying false warmth. And this must be the mail-order bride everyone's been talking about. The one with the unfortunate face. Claire felt the words like a slap, but she kept her expression neutral. Ben stepped slightly in front of her, protective. Someone poisoned my water supply, Ben said bluntly. Lost 7 head of cattle so far. Vernon's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. That's terrible. Did you report it to the sheriff? Sheriff's in Hayes' pocket. Everyone knows it. Ben's voice was hard. I'm here to tell you it won't work. I'm not selling. I don't know what you're implying, boy, but I don't appreciate the accusation. Vernon's smile vanished. I made you a fair offer for that worthless patch of dirt you call a ranch. Not my fault you're too stubborn to take it. Fair offer, Ben scoffed. You offered half what the land's worth. It's worth what someone's willing to pay. And that land's not worth much, especially not after your cattle keep dying mysteriously. Vernon's eyes glittered. Might want to reconsider my offer before things get worse. Claire had heard enough. She stepped forward, ignoring Ben's warning hand on her arm. You're threatening us. Vernon looked her up and down dismissively. I'm stating facts, sweetheart. Running a ranch alone is hard. Running one with a useless wife who can't even make the other mail-order prospects is just plain stupid. My wife is none of your concern, Ben said, his voice dangerous. She is when she's part of the dead weight dragging down your pathetic operation. Vernon gestured broadly. Look at this place, Carter. Then look at yours. I built an empire while you're struggling to keep 30 head of cattle alive.
You think that scarred girl is going to help you compete?
You think she's worth the trouble? Claire felt something snap inside her. Before she could think better of it, she spoke, her voice cutting and clear. I think a man who needs to poison water and bully his neighbors to succeed isn't much of a man at all. I think you're scared of what even a small ranch like ours represents, proof that you don't have to be cruel to survive out here. Vernon's face flushed red. You got a mouth on you, girl. And you've got a problem, Claire continued, surprising herself with her own boldness. Because we're not leaving. Do your worst, Mr. Hayes. Poison more water, kill more cattle, send your men to intimidate us. We'll still be there, working our land, proving every single day that you can't buy or bully everyone. Ben was staring at her with something like awe, but Claire kept her focus on Vernon. The older man looked furious, his hands clenched at his sides. You're making a mistake, Vernon said quietly, dangerously. Both of you. No, Ben said, finding his voice again. The only mistake would be letting a man like you win. He took Claire's hand. Come on, wife. We got work to do. They rode away from the Hayes Ranch in tense silence. Once they were out of sight, Ben pulled his horse to a stop. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, he said. Claire's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Probably stupid. I'm sorry if I made things worse. Made things worse? Ben laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and delight. Claire, you were magnificent. Did you see his face when you called him out? He's going to retaliate. We both know it. Probably. Ben sobered, but you were right about what you said. We can't let men like him win just because we're scared. Jack would have loved you. The compliment warmed Claire more than she expected. They rode home in better spirits, though both knew the fight with Vernon Hayes was far from over. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. Fences were cut in the night, releasing cattle that took days to round up. Equipment went missing from the barn. Someone started a small fire near the hay storage, though they caught it before it spread. Through it all, Claire and Ben worked side by side, sleeping in shifts to watch for intruders, repairing damage as fast as it appeared. The constant stress wore on them both, but it also forged something stronger between them. They learned to anticipate each other's movements, to communicate with looks instead of words, to rely on each other completely. One night, after chasing off someone who'd been trying to spook the horses, they sat together on the porch steps, exhausted and frustrated. "I can't keep living like this," Ben admitted. "Can't keep putting you in danger." "So what, you give up? Sell to Vernon?" Claire shook her head firmly. "No. What choice do we have? We're barely surviving, Claire. The ranch is suffering, we're both exhausted, and sooner or later someone's going to get hurt." Claire was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, "What if we weren't alone? What if we had help? Can't afford to hire anyone." "I'm not talking about hired help. I'm talking about other ranchers, the small ones like us. Vernon can't be the only person trying to run them out. What if we banded together?" Ben looked at her with growing interest. "A cooperative? Something like that? Shared resources, shared labor, shared defense. Vernon can intimidate one small ranch, but a dozen, all watching out for each other?" Claire felt excitement building. "We make ourselves too costly to destroy. It could work." Ben stood, pacing now with energy instead of exhaustion. "The Suttons to the west, they're struggling too. And the widow Morrison, she's got a small place north of us. Pete Davidson just started a spread down by the river. We talk to them, explain what's happening, offer an alliance." Claire stood too. "Vernon Hayes wants to isolate us, make us weak, so we do the opposite." Ben grabbed her shoulders, grinning. "You're brilliant, you know that?" Before she could respond, he kissed her. Not the chaste peck from their wedding, but a real kiss, full of relief and admiration and something deeper. Claire kissed him back, realizing that somewhere between the rejection and Copper Ridge and this moment of defiance on their porch, she'd fallen in love with her husband. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ben looked sheepish. "Sorry, I should have asked first." "Don't apologize." Claire smiled. "We're married, remember? And partners. Partners celebrate victories together." "We haven't won yet." "No," Claire agreed, "but we will." They spent the next day riding to neighboring ranches, presenting their idea. Some were skeptical, some were scared, but most were desperate enough to try anything. By the end of the week, they'd formed a loose alliance of 8 small ranchers, all agreeing to help each other and watch out for sabotage. The change was immediate. With multiple sets of eyes watching, Vernon's men couldn't operate as freely. When fences were cut on the Morrison property, 5 ranchers showed up the next morning to help repair them. When someone tried to poison the Suttons' water, Pete Davidson's ranch hands caught them in the act. Vernon Hayes wasn't done, but his tactics had to change. And for the first time since the cattle started dying, Ben and Claire felt like they had a chance. The showdown came on a Friday afternoon in late autumn. Vernon Hayes rode up to their property with 6 men, all armed, all looking ready for trouble. Claire was hanging laundry when she saw them coming, and she immediately rang the bell Ben had installed for emergencies. Within 20 minutes, 4 of their alliance partners had arrived, bringing their own ranch hands. Vernon found himself facing not 2 desperate homesteaders, but nearly 20 armed men and women, all standing united. "This is private property," Ben said calmly, though Claire could see the tension in his shoulders. "State your business or leave." Vernon's confidence faltered slightly, seeing the crowd. "I'm making one final offer for your land, Carter. $20,000, double my original price. Take it or face the consequences." "The consequences?" Claire stepped forward, standing beside Ben. "You mean more sabotage?" "More intimidation? Because if that's what you're planning, Mr. Hayes, you should know you're not just fighting us anymore. You're fighting all of us." She gestured to the assembled ranchers. Each one nodded, showing solidarity. Vernon's face darkened. "You people are making a mistake. I own half this county. I've got connections, resources, and we've got each other," said Mary Sutton, a tough woman in her 40s. "We've got witnesses to your crimes, documentation of every fence you've cut, every animal you've poisoned. Pete's brother is a lawyer over in Silver City. We're prepared to take this to court if we have to." "Courts cost money," Vernon sneered. "We'll pool our resources," Ben said. "And while it's tied up in legal battles, every newspaper in the territory will hear about how Vernon Hayes, successful cattle baron, wages war against struggling homesteaders. Think that'll be good for your reputation?" For the first time, Vernon Hayes looked uncertain. He'd built his empire on fear and intimidation, but he'd also built it on his reputation as a shrewd businessman. A public legal battle that painted him as a bully could damage that carefully constructed image. "This isn't over," Vernon finally said. "Yes, it is," Claire replied firmly. "You've lost, Mr. Hayes. Not because we beat you, but because you can't beat all of us together. So take your men and leave our property. And if anyone associated with you comes near any of these ranches again, we'll have the law down on you so fast your head will spin." Vernon stared at her for a long moment, and Claire stared back, refusing to flinch or look away. Finally, he turned his horse and rode off, his men following. The assembled ranchers erupted in cheers once they were out of sight. Ben grabbed Claire and spun her around, both of them laughing with relief and joy. "We did it," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her waist.
"We actually did it." "We did," Claire agreed.
Then, looking at the gathered friends, "We all did." That night, after everyone had gone home and the ranch was quiet again, Claire and Ben sat together watching the sunset from their porch. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. The chickens roosted safely in their coop, and for the first time since Claire had arrived, everything felt right. "I never thanked you properly," Ben said quietly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me that day in town. For not giving up when things got hard. For being so much stronger and smarter than I ever expected." He took her hand. "I know this wasn't what you imagined when you signed up to be a mail-order bride." "You're right, it wasn't. I imagined some fairy tale romance, a wealthy rancher sweeping me off my feet, an easy life." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "This is better." "Better than easy?" "This is real, Ben. The struggle, the fear, the victory, all of it. We built something here, something worth fighting for." She lifted her head to look at him. "Those men in Copperidge, they wanted someone who'd make their lives easier. You asked me to build a life with you. That's so much better." Ben kissed her forehead gently. "I love you, Claire Carter. I know it's only been a couple months, but I do. I love your strength, your courage, your refusal to quit." "I love you too," Claire said, the words feeling both terrifying and perfect. Not despite the hardships, but maybe because of them. "We've been through fire together, literally and figuratively. If we can survive all this, we can survive anything." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, both thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Claire thought about the woman she'd been when she stepped off that stagecoach, scared and scarred and certain she was worthless. She hardly recognized that woman now. "What are you thinking about?" Ben asked. "How much I've changed. How much we both have." "You think we would have found each other if things had been different? If you hadn't been rejected? If I hadn't been desperate?" "I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe we needed to be broken down to the essentials before we could really see each other." "The mail-order bride everyone rejected," Ben quoted with a smile. "And the failing rancher who couldn't even afford to advertise for one. Sounds like the beginning of a story." "It is. Our story." Ben stood, pulling her up with him. "And I think it's time we started the next chapter." He led her inside, and this time when he climbed the stairs, she followed him. They'd given themselves time to build trust, to build love, and now they were ready to truly be husband and wife in every way. The next morning, Claire woke wrapped in Ben's arms, feeling more content than she'd ever thought possible. Sunlight streamed through the window, and she could hear the chickens outside demanding their breakfast. Ranch life would continue with all its demands and challenges, but now they'd face it together, fully and completely. She thought about the rejected bride she'd been, standing alone in that dusty street, and the woman she'd become, strong enough to stare down a cattle baron and smart enough to unite a community. The scar on her face hadn't changed, but the way she saw it had. It was no longer a mark of tragedy, but a badge of survival, a reminder that she could endure anything. Ben stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her watching him, he smiled that genuine smile that had made her trust him from the beginning. "Morning, wife. Morning, husband. Ready for another day of ranch work?" Claire stretched, feeling pleasantly sore in new ways. "Always. But maybe we can have breakfast first. Your cooking's gotten pretty good," Ben teased. "Don't push your luck, Carter." They dressed and headed downstairs together, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of a couple who'd learned to work as a team. As Claire started breakfast and Ben headed out to check on the animals, she reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. She'd come to Copper Ridge hoping for acceptance, for someone to overlook her flaws and give her a chance at a normal life. Instead, she'd found something better, a partner who saw past her scars to the strength beneath, a man who didn't want someone perfect but someone real. The mail-order bride system was supposed to provide desperate women with security and lonely men with companionship, a practical transaction dressed up as romance. But somehow, against all odds, she and Ben had found something genuine. Not despite the difficulties, but because of them. They'd been forged together in fire and conflict, and what remained was stronger than any easy romance could have been. When Ben came back inside stamping snow from his boots, she had breakfast waiting. They ate together, planning the day's work, discussing which fences needed attention, and whether they should expand the chicken coop before winter truly set in. Normal, mundane conversations that felt precious because they represented a future they'd built together. The Suttons are having a barn raising next month, Ben mentioned. We should go help. And Mary mentioned maybe having a harvest celebration at our place in the spring if we do well with the planting. Claire smiled at the casual mention of their growing community connections. Our place. I like the sound of that. It's as much yours as mine now. More, maybe.
You're the one who saved it. We saved it.
Together. After breakfast, they worked side by side repairing a section of fence damaged in the recent cold snap. The physical labor was hard but satisfying, each post driven into the frozen ground a small victory. They worked in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by easy conversation, the kind that only came from true familiarity. Around midday, a rider approached. Claire tensed instinctively, but Ben recognized him as one of Pete Davidson's hands. "Message from town," the young man said, handing Ben a folded paper. "Thought you'd want to know right away." Ben read it quickly, then grinned. Vernon Hayes sold his ranch. He's leaving the county. Claire's eyes widened. "Really?" Says here he got an offer from some investors back east. Too good to refuse. He's already gone. Ben laughed, the sound full of relief and triumph. We actually did it. We won. After the messenger left, Claire and Ben stood together looking out over their land. Their small, hard-won piece of earth that represented so much more than acreage and cattle. It represented choice, resilience, and the power of refusing to give up. "Those men in Copper Ridge," Claire said quietly, "the ones who rejected me. I wonder sometimes what they're doing, if they found what they were looking for. Does it matter?" Claire thought about it, then shook her head. No. They were looking for something easy, something that fit their expectations. I'm glad they rejected me. Because it led me here, to you, to this life we built. Ben pulled her close, and they stood that way for a long moment. Two people who'd found each other in desperation and built something beautiful from broken pieces. "Will you try with me?" Ben quoted softly, repeating his words from that first day. Claire pulled back to look at him, seeing not the desperate rancher who'd offered her a lifeline, but the man who'd become her partner, her love, her home. "Every day for the rest of my life," she promised. They kissed there in the snow, surrounded by the land they'd fought to keep, two survivors who'd found not just refuge, but purpose in each other. The mail-order bride everyone rejected had found exactly what she needed, not by being chosen by someone looking for perfection, but by choosing someone who valued her strength. And in the end, that made all the difference. The story could have ended there, with triumph over their enemy and love conquering all. But real life continued beyond the dramatic moments, and Claire's real story, she understood now, wasn't about the rejection or even the victory. It was about building a life, day by day, choice by choice, with someone who saw her worth when others couldn't. As they walked back to the cabin, Ben's arm around her shoulders and her hand on his waist, Claire felt a peace she'd never known before. Not the peace of everything being easy, but the peace of knowing she could handle whatever came next. Because she wasn't alone anymore. She was home,